Hi guys, it's Kelly Lativola here, and I am back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today I'm going to be using some of the new release. This is Pumpkin Patch and its matching dies, Fabulous. Yeah, I didn't mispronounce it. Sentiments. And then I used one of the leaves from the Buttercup set. So originally I set out to just play around with my alcohol lift ink, but I don't really do a lot with alcohol inks, so I wanted like a practice piece, and that's where this piece comes in. So I started by putting down some of the alcohol blending solution, and then here I have some alcohol pearls. I did not plan ahead and shake them all up before I turned on the camera, so my apologies. So I put down some of the green and then some yellow, from there orange into red. And I pretty much just fall colors, that's what I was thinking. And I kind of wanted something that went up the page at like an angle, like just like the corner. And then I'm going to use a straw to kind of move that around a little bit. I have a lot of that blending solution down, so they're moving pretty easily. However, I felt like my yellows kind of spread pretty far, and so I'm going to keep adding these alcohol inks, alcohol pearls, until I get something that I'm happy with. Before we keep going, I just wanted to say that obviously it's been a hot minute since the last time that I did a video for Honeybee, and I owe you guys a winner. So the winner for the Instagram giveaway, I actually screenshotted it, is Bad Kitty TJ2. And so I will put that, once I put this video up and put it live, I will put it on Instagram as well. So congratulations to her. This whole favorite pet thing was like the best idea I've ever had, honestly, because I loved reading all about your pets and all of the things, experiences that you had, because you guys were sharing stories, and I just totally loved every second of it. So thank you so much for entering, and we did manage to reach 10,000 followers, which is fantastic. So here I've just been adding the colors and blowing them around. Once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to leave it, set it aside to dry, and then I'm going to move on to the background, of which I'm going to use the actual alcohol lift ink. Here, again, just putting down a ton of that blending solution. I'm going to use the same color combinations, and I just moved in kind of like a diagonal. The Yupo paper, which is what I'm working on, is the one that I have is 5x7. And as you all know, an A2 size card is 4¼ by 5½. So it doesn't give you two perfect pieces, and it's way too big for one piece. So usually I will cut them in half, and then I'll just mount them like on a white card base so that there's some extra around it. But for the first one, because I really loved the way it came out, I wanted to turn it into a card. It's very rare that I have a practice piece that I actually like the way that it turns out. So I wanted to capitalize on it while I had one that I liked. And then for this one, I just really didn't want to do, I was already like signing myself up to make 3 cards, and so I wasn't trying to make it 4. Not that there's ever too many cards, there aren't, but I was on kind of a time crunch. It's been a very hectic week in my life. So anywho, just the same thing, just kind of adding those in, blowing them around. I get a little bit apprehensive when I'm adding more of the blending solution, because it can seem like, to me at least, it pushes the colors out, which is what it's supposed to do, but then it can make them kind of muddy if they're mixing too much. So I just put a very little bit down just so I could kind of break up some of those circles and get the ink moving a little bit more. And then again, once I'm done with that, I set it aside. Here I thought that I would just splatter on some of this gold mixative. I didn't want gold all in, like in everywhere. That's why I didn't put it down when it was wet. I just kind of wanted splatters of it. That did not work. So what I ended up doing was just putting a little bit on a clear block, and then using a paintbrush. This is an older one that I have, that I was like, hey, if this doesn't come off, I don't care. But it did in fact come off. I just cleaned it with alcohol. And then I just used the side of the block to kind of splatter that in the background, just to add a little bit more shine and kind of break up those colors. I'm going to mimic that on the other card. So here I've trimmed them down. This is the original size. I was just showing you the difference. And now they are both down to A2 size cards. So I'm not doing any stamping on the practice piece, just on this one. I have a bunch of leaves from the Pumpkin Patch set, and then also that one large one from the Buttercup set, which I don't use enough. I should use that one again. But so I'm just going to ink this up. I'm going to stamp it down. Now for these ones, for the big ones, I'm not going to stamp them on my scrap piece of paper. I'm just going to clean them off on my grid pack here that I have. So you saw me kind of blotting it. Now, I knew from watching tutorials, because I'm not well versed in this, guys, let's be honest, this is an experimentation for me, but that's kind of half the fun. I knew from watching tutorials that you're supposed to ink up your stamp it down, and then like wipe the area. But I was apprehensive about just like straight up rubbing it on there. Here, I'm going to start transferring them. So when I pick up the ink from the left-hand side with the alcohol lift ink, I'm going to stamp it down on the right-hand side. You're not going to be able to see any of that. I mean, honestly, none of it. But what I learned was, as I proceeded through this, that if I rubbed it, like really rubbed it, that's when the alcohol like kind of separated and I could see the image where it had been lifted, like the ghost image that's left behind. So they are a little bit difficult to see on the like the alcohol ink background, and I think a couple of things contributed to this. First of all, I'm using outline stamps. So it's taking away a very small portion of the ink. Second of all, I used pearls. So with that shimmer, I think it's making it much more difficult to see that white like ghost image it leaves behind. And then third, I don't think that I, like in the beginning of them, I was not rubbing hard enough to remove it. So you couldn't really see it. And then using the, just the lighter colors, it shows up way better, like in the reds and the oranges than it does on, well, it barely shows up on the yellow, quite honestly. But yellow and white, I mean, that doesn't really surprise me. The green does okay. It kind of looks a little bit almost like a blue underneath it. But so I think that just for experimenting, it was a good lesson. I will know more, the next time I sit down to do it. So now at this point, I've stamped them all down. You can see the pearls. You can see some of the, leaves in the background. You can see it much better in real life than you can on camera. And I do have on the blog a couple of like close-up pictures that you can see it. I'm going to stamp all of these down in Copic Safe ink, and then I'm going to repeat the leaves a couple of different times since I need so many of those, and then I'm going to start coloring. Another thing to note, now that we're 8 minutes in, right? There's a sale going on this weekend. Honeybee Stamp's having a Labor Day sale. There's 20% off. It does exclude the newest release, but it does include their clearance, which is awesome. So there's no code needed. It'll be linked down below if you're watching on YouTube, for you to head over there and see what's what, if there's any goodies you want to pick up. And then also, today is day 1 of the Autumn Blessings blog hop. There's also a day 2 tomorrow, August 31st. And they're giving away a $50 each day fall prize pack. So that's just something that will also be linked below if you want to throw your name in the hat for that as well. Giveaways are always super fun. So here, like I said, I'm just going to move these leaves up so that I can stamp a couple of more of these. I think I stamped like 15 total. And now we're going to get into the coloring. I like coloring pumpkins, even though I'm not a fall person. Because they're something that's like quick and easy and good practice. So these, anytime 2 points meet, anytime one object lays on top of another. So we don't have anything where an object is laying on top of one another, but where the points meet, that would be the darkest. So the top of your pumpkin, bottom of your pumpkin, those would be dark. And then where those lines are, where each individual section of the pumpkin is, will also be darker. So these are really just very simple to color. The color scheme that I have chose, I remember when I was sitting with my friend Gianna when we were at retreat. She was coloring a pumpkin that had a cat on it. And she was like, it's just like my pumpkin's flat. And I was like, well, you need darker colors. And she was like, but I'm scared of darker colors. So like I sat there with her and picked out the colors. And she's like, none of these are even in the same family, Kelly. Like I picked out the ones that I'm using here, and it is a Y08, a YR04, a YR09, and a R29. And there's a couple of different combinations that you can use. I like this one because it's really bright and bold, and that's just what I tend to gravitate towards. But don't be afraid to mix your colors and take them outside of their color families, because sometimes they still work together really, really nicely. So I layered each of the colors next to those lines from lightest to darkest and then darkest back out to lightest. As I did my second layer, I moved out a little further into the pumpkin, so that way I was filling in those areas. And you can see here it's still dimensional, but still super bright. I used 2 of the darker browns for the stems of my pumpkins. And wherever it was bent over, like not all of them go in the same direction, but wherever it was curled over, that's where I put my darkest shading, and then I filled in the rest with my lightest. There's all the pumpkins. I did them all the same way with all the same color combinations. And now I'm going to move on to the leaves. So I really wanted, fall leaves are all different colors. That's one of the benefits of actually living in Ohio is we have 4 distinct seasons. And so in the fall, it is beautiful. It's very pretty here. So here I'm blending a couple of different colors together. I actually went from an R35 to a Y38. I would recommend probably putting in a YR04 in between those, just because I did have a little bit of struggle blending them. Eventually, when I turned off the camera and was kind of playing around, that's what I ended up doing, and that seemed to be the best way to make that work. So just so that way you don't have to go over it bunches of times. For the smaller ones, you can put as many colors on here as you want. I did some with 2, some with 3, some with 4, but I just really wanted to show you how they kind of blend together. For the yellow's always the hardest. That's fact. Yellow's always the hardest, and you do have to go over it a couple of times for it to lighten up the border where it meets the other color. But totally worth it, because at the end of it you have all of these different colored leaves and they're super pretty. So trying to think what else is going on in my life. So we did have the home visit today, and I was super nervous. So one of the things, and I don't talk about a lot my marriage or us deciding not to be married anymore. Side note, outlining all of these images because that's how I roll. Bold black outline is the bottom diggity, and then I'm going to die cut all of them out. So but anyway, I don't really talk about that. Ooh, this is the fall stamp set and the fall dies. Since I ended up with 3 cards I was not prepared for, I ended up having to bust out extra sentiments. So these I'm just going to heat emboss all of them. I'm going to treat the paper with my anti-static tool. I'm going to stamp in Versamark. I'm going to heat emboss them in white and then trim them into little labels. But anywho, so I don't really talk about that because frankly I feel like I share a lot, and I'm down to share a lot when it comes to me and my personal things, but I don't really feel like my ex-husband's business is anybody else's business, and it would be unfair of me to have those conversations with thousands of people, quite honestly. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he's still a very good person, and I have a lot of love and respect for him, and he's a wonderful father, and I couldn't ask for more than that. So, but one of the things that I left my marriage with was some issues with myself, and one of those issues is housekeeping. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you are in a place where everybody criticizes it, really, let's be honest. I read a post, it was an article the other day about, and I was telling my friend Dawn about this woman who had just had a baby, and she had 2 other younger children, and her husband was at work. And any of you who have small children or a lot of animals, sometimes your house is just a hot mess, and it just is what it is, and there's no point following behind them picking up everything, because they're just going to be more stuff to pick up. So anywho, this lady had a surprise visit by some family members. Oh, here's how I'm mimicking that gold alcohol ink mixative. I'm using copper perfect pearls because that's what matches the glitter paper. That's super pretty. But so she had some family members that inadvertently stopped by, just unannounced, and her house was a hot mess. And she was like, I was horrified and I didn't want to let them in, but what am I going to tell them? And I think we've all been there. And so she does let them in, and then when they're on their way out, her aunt says to her, I realize you have a lot going on, but I think you're getting a little lazy, in reference to her house. And I think that there's a lot of judgment for people on how tidy they are, how organized they are. I'm not. Okay? I'm not. I'm not good at it. It's not something that I've ever been good at. And it's not something that's important to me. So could I change it? Could I get better about that? Could I spend my time taking classes and reading books and seeing how to be better organized? Yes, I could. Am I going to do that? Absolutely not. At the end of the day, I remember somebody in my life had said to me the one time, I get that you need to make your cards, and that's something that you're doing, but couldn't you do it after you clean the house? Or somebody had made the comment to me that, and this isn't, that person isn't even my ex-husband. Like, I'm not disparaging comments about him. It was outside people about my house being a mess or my house being cluttered. And that was one of the people I worked with, actually. But anyway, it's just not something that registers on my radar. And it's not something that's super important to me. And at the end of the day, if it's not work and it's just house cleaning, and I'm not talking about like living in squalor or bugs, though I do have those through no fault of my own. But my house is lived in, and I'm okay with that. But that's one of the reasons why I live alone, quite frankly, is because then I don't have to listen to anybody else's opinion about it, which is super helpful for me. But anyway, so we had our home visit, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was really, really apprehensive because, here I am, this person who has this anxiety about what other people say or think or interpret about me as a person, or their impression about me as a person, simply because of how I keep my house. And she's coming to judge me specifically on how I keep my house. So you can see how maybe that might lead to a little bit of anxiety. But actually she was super nice, and I think it went well. She said, I think we're good. She was going to contact the owner of the rescue. So I actually think we're going to be able to get Emma and bring her home, which makes me super happy. So yeah, that's a thing. So we might be growing by four paws here soon. If you follow me on Instagram, I share a ton of pictures over there. I'm sure I will be sharing pictures of her as well if she ends up coming home. So I'm very excited about that, and I will keep you apprised of the situation. So anyway, back to these cards. I am just basically putting them together. So I kind of had an idea in my head about how I wanted them to go together when I was stamping them out. But sometimes it doesn't always work out, quite honestly. Sometimes you need an extra leaf, or you stamped one too many leaves. But this one actually kind of worked out perfectly. So the first one you saw me put together was the fall is my favorite, which is a complete lie, by the way. That's, for me, is a huge lie. I know people who love fall. And in fact, Shari Moss, we were chatting, and she was like, how are we even friends if you don't like fall? And I told her she loved Jen Shirkus, and then she said, I see your point. But actually what I'm going to do is, this fall is my favorite. I'm going to mail this card to Jen, who loves all things summer. And in the inside of it, I am going to write something like, just kidding, when summer coming back, or something like that, because I think it would be funny. And Jen will get my sense of humor. So then these ones just... building the little banners, I wanted something besides just black, so I added that glitter paper again. And then this one is really this layout for the 3 pumpkins is what I had in mind when I sat down to make one card. But sometimes you just, inspiration strikes you, and the things are there, and you just get them all together, and it works out. So now I have a couple of fall cards to send. One of them is definitely going to Shari, now that I know that she loves all things fall. That for sure will be going to her if I ever mail it. If I ever mail anything ever in my life again. Let's be honest. So I glued all of the stuff in the background down flat, and then I'm popping up these 2 pumpkins on foam, and then there's one little green leaf I'm going to put in the front. And for the most part, that's going to be adhered to the pumpkins just flat. But there was kind of a part of it that like hung over at the bottom. And so I needed to slide just like a little teeny tiny piece of foam tape to balance it. I was having a little bit of trouble getting it to stick to my scissors, but eventually we got there. Then I messed around for eons with the layout of the sentiment for this one because I just couldn't figure out a way that I wanted to make it work. I knew I wanted them to be popped up. I kept moving them around this way, that way. Sometimes it's just like that. And then eventually, I did spare you all of that. You're welcome. I just committed and went ahead and adhered them, peeled off their little backing and put them down. So this one ultimately is, like, this background is my favorite one. I just really like the way that it came out, and that was totally my practice piece, so isn't that funny? I'm going to use some clear glitter pen just on everything for all the shimmer. So I got alcohol pearls, and then I got the shimmers on the actual colored objects. And then, like, that's it. These are all of the cards. Like I said, you really can't see the stamped leaves in the background on the one, but there are close-ups where you can catch glimpses of them if you'd like to see them on the blog. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video.